Hi, my name is Michael Simon, and with me is my partner Adam Richards. And tonight we'll be analyzing the Nintendo Corporation. Whether it's Mario or Luigi or Yoshi or Donkey Kong Jr. or Pikachu or a whole host of other very famous characters, the Nintendo Corporation holds a very special place in our history. For a very certain age group, from the 20s to 40s, we grew up with the Nintendo Corporation and watched it evolve from a very small company that began making video games to one that is now one of the top three companies that produces video games that we can all recognize and remember growing up with. Now, the Nintendo Corporation didn't just start as a video game company producing Mario Brothers. The Nintendo Corporation actually has an amazing heritage and is actually the oldest gaming company in existence, dating all the way back to the 1800s. The Nintendo company started off making playing cards. Their goal was to provide a means of entertainment to the average person. Their belief was that if they could entertain you and put a smile on your face, they were successful. And they started doing this with simple playing cards back in Japan in the late 1800s. Here is an example of some of their earlier products. Now, they continued to make playing cards from the late 1800s all the way up through the mid 1900s before they ventured into other enterprises. Now, the company has a very long history, and it's important to highlight some of that history, which I will do right now. In 1889, like I said, they began as a Japanese playing card company. And they were making cards that were very specific to the Japanese people that only they would really recognize. In 1902, they started actually making Western playing cards for the Japanese audience. And they found great success in doing that. Later on, in 1947, they began to grow and became a larger corporation, changing their name. And in 1949, they made Hiroshi Yamauchi the president of Nintendo as it was known then. In 1951, they changed the company's name to the Nintendo Playing Card Company, Ltd. And in 53, they became the first company to succeed in mass producing plastic playing cards in Japan. We know these nowadays as our everyday playing cards and take them for granted, but prior to that, they were paper cards. In 1959, they formed a very unique partnership. They partnered with the Walt Disney Corporation and began making cards that featured the Disney characters. And this was a very large step for them in creating a partnership with a Western company. They also, at that time, began to automate the production of the Japanese playing cards with machines that were pasting paperback designs onto the plastic cards. Moving ahead from 1959 to 1961, the Nintendo company begins to expand into Tokyo, making a larger presence throughout Japan. Forward to 1962, they become listed on the stock exchange as a primary company, which was a huge financial move for them. And in 63, they changed the name of the company to the Nintendo Company Ltd. At this point, they started to branch out from just doing playing cards to other ventures, and we will touch on those later on in the presentation and discuss the success and failures with some of those other ventures. In 1970, the stock exchange listing was changed to the first section of the Securities Exchange, which is where the prominent corporations are listed. Again, very important to the finances of the company. And in 73, they make a big jump. They develop an entertainment system called the Laser Clay Shooting System for leisure facilities. And you see a picture of one of those facilities right there. A very large system, but again, a move ahead into the more of the entertainment sector, if you will. In 1977, Nintendo launches the first home video machine. and they call it the TV Game 15 and TV Game 16. Nothing that we ever saw in the States in its early stages, but was a huge leap into video game creation for Nintendo. In 1978, they make a huge leap. They develop and start selling arcade video game machines. And these are the machines that we quickly grew to know here in the States. The first game we all knew very well was Donkey Kong, later on to be followed by Donkey Kong Jr. And that very famous ape really helped make quite a name for the Nintendo Corporation. In 1980, to help further the distribution in the States, they established a wholly owned subsidiary, Nintendo of America, based at first in New York, later on to be relocated to Seattle with a subsidiary in New York. In 1983, they launched their first home video game console here in the States, and that becomes known as the Nintendo Entertainment System, or NES as we all affectionately referred to it years ago. In 1985, they start selling Super Mario Brothers, and that game is one that launches them into stardom. Characters that we still know and love today, and play with on video games, and watch our kids play with as well. In '89, they take another step forward, launching the first handheld video game system called the Game Boy, to be followed by other manufacturers following their lead. In 1990, they launch another home video console known as the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. And then in '96, they launched Nintendo 64, 64-bit system, which again is to be followed with by other manufacturers doing the same type of product. And in 2001, they launched another handheld, the Game Boy Advance, and they also launched a Nintendo GameCube. Shortly after that, in 2002, a new president comes on the scene for Nintendo. Satoru Iwata takes over as president of Nintendo, and we'll touch on Mr. Iwata's history with the company in just a couple of slides. In 2004, the company launches the video game system known as Nintendo DS, which is the first handheld system with 2 screens. And then in 2006, the company makes a huge leap and introduces the Wii to the world. And that was perhaps their largest contribution. The Wii becomes the largest video game, home video game seller of all time, beating out everyone's records and cumulatively selling more units than any other video game has ever sold. In 2008, they launched a Nintendo DSi with again great success. And then they start not to be too successful in their products that they release. 2011, they introduced the Nintendo 3DS with mixed reviews. And then 2012, they introduced their next home game console called the Wii U, which they fail to demonstrate to the public and to reviewers what the great advantage of the Wii U would be over other video game systems that are out there, and over the Wii itself. Now that is a rather long history of a gaming company to share, but I think it's important to understand. This company has been around for 125 years. It has based itself on entertaining people, and as the president has said, putting a smile on their faces, which is a core competency that this company needs to remember and go back to as it faces newer challenges going forward. Now, let's talk a little bit about the Nintendo leadership, because they are a very special group of people too, and it's important for us to realize when we analyze the company who's actually calling the shots. Now, the president of Nintendo today is Satoru Iwata. Now, Mr. Iwata is only the 4th president of Nintendo. 125-year company, only having 4 presidents says a lot. He's also the first president to not be part of the Yamauchi family. Now, he joined Nintendo in 2000 after leaving HAL Enterprises, where he rose from a programmer to president of that company. He is a young man. He's only 57 years old, and he's been named in the past by Barron's as one of the top CEOs in the world. Quite an honorable distinction. Next in the chain of command at Nintendo is Mr. Genyo Takeda. He's the Senior Managing Director in charge of Integrated Research and Development. Now, Mr. Takeda has quite a history with Nintendo. He's been with the company since 1970, joining the company right out of school. He was one of the very first video game developers and is responsible for most of the big name titles that skyrocketed Nintendo to stardom. Now, he's 69 years old and is number 2 in command. Now, number 3 in command is one of the other senior managing directors, Shigeru Miyamoto. So Mr. Miyamoto joined Nintendo in 1977 as a graphic video game artist and designer, and he's responsible for some of the greatest video games Nintendo has ever produced as well. He was actually named by IGN as one of the greatest video game designers of all time, and he was named by Time Magazine in Time's Top 100 several years back as well. So that sums up Nintendo's principal leadership and a little bit of the history of the company. Now let's take a look at Nintendo and see the current state of affairs and why we are actually presenting the company. This is just a snapshot of Nintendo's current stock. And you can see that over time, the value of the company has dropped tremendously. And this is noteworthy in that you had a company that was one of the most successful video game companies of all time now seeing a huge turnaround in their stock. This slide speaks to current sales and operating income. And you can also see that in a period from 2009 to 2013, sales have dropped by more than half. And if you look at operating income, it's actually gone into negative values. And unfortunately, Nintendo has shown a loss for the last 3 fiscal years running. So now to discuss more of Nintendo's current condition and other aspects of the company, I'd like to introduce you to Adam Richards. Adam, take it away.
Thanks, Michael. Now let's look at the current condition of the company. We see that Nintendo has an interesting background, but the current situation within the last few years is beginning to paint a not so bright future. As you can see, the net sales have actually been on the decline, and the operating income is actually in the red. Nintendo has posted losses in the last several years. If we look at the external environment for Nintendo, we see that starting with the economic environment, in general, there's a worldwide recession, as I think everybody probably knew. Sales are dipping in almost every industry. Socioculturally, Nintendo has failed to keep up with gamers and the increasing appetites for cutting-edge game technology. They've maintained their policy to limit violence and gore, which may have possibly worked against them in the competitive market. Globally, the same trend holds true with various markets decreasing in Nintendo sales challenged. In the technology industry, Nintendo has failed to engage players in their technology. While the Wii was a great step in the right direction, Nintendo's failed to retain that growth. They failed to increase and introduce a new product that was engaging to players. The demographics for Nintendo they've succeeded in drawing new crowds, from senior citizens to young children and everything in between. They've probably got the corner on the market from that aspect. They've engaged demographics that haven't been previously engaged in the gaming industry. In the physical department and the physical aspects of the environment, there's very few factors that influence Nintendo. One note in the physical environment is that they have had some poor rankings from environmentally conscious organizations. They've failed to disclose information, and from that failure, it's led people to assume and give them bad rankings for environmental friendliness. In the political and legal environment, Nintendo's been fairly wise. They've had very few risk issues. They've had very few legal cases to be involved with. So they've been doing fairly well to keep out of the limelight in the legal aspect. When you look at all the external environments, you see some of the challenges that have had an impact and possibly had an impact on their decreased sales. Competitors have been successful at capturing some of the market that Nintendo hasn't been able to capture. When you look at Porter's five forces, starting with interfirm rivalry, the stakes are very high with Nintendo. Several very diverse companies are competing head to head with them in the gaming industry. Nintendo is very focused on gaming, while Sony and Microsoft have other industries which they compete on. So this is part of their diversification strategy, where Nintendo's been real focused on this. In the threat of substitute products, the competition for gaming is fairly well eye to eye. Nintendo competes on the gaming level with these other companies and their gaming products. But in other industries related to this, PC gaming, mobile phones, tablets, all these other options for gaming, Nintendo is not keeping up. In the bargaining power of suppliers, there's not been an opportunity as of late for Nintendo to have the edge with supply and demand. The demand has not exceeded the supply of Nintendo consoles. So for Nintendo, this hasn't been their issue or their advantage. With the threat of new entrants, there have been some new entrants into this market, but very few have survived. Really, Nintendo has only competed with Sony and Microsoft, and they're very focused and successful at competing with them. With the bargaining power of buyers, and the power goes to the buyers right now for Nintendo. With the lackluster performance from the Wii U, their newest advent to the market, they've really not enjoyed the power of being in their suppliers' hands. It's been in the buyers' hands. Lackluster sales have forced Nintendo to drop prices and really appeal to the gamers to get more sales. When you're looking at video games by genre, according to StuffsHappening.com in 2013, this graphic demonstrates the various genres and how many are being sold by each genre of games. So the number one selling game right now are action games, closely followed by shooter type games, which seems a very similar style. They seem very closely related. Again, looking from the same type of chart, this demonstrates what computer gamers are buying. When you're looking at computer games, what's being sold is mostly the strategy games, followed by the casual games. This gives us an idea of what other industries are looking at. If it's not Nintendo, Microsoft, or Sony, what are the gamers looking at? And where is the video game market headed? Well, looking at the past, you can see the difference in growth in the different areas where iOS and Android are really changing the paradigm in gaming. In the last 2 years, it's gone from 70% domination from Nintendo to almost 60% domination by the mobile phones, which is about a 39% swing towards the mobile gaming industry. The main competitors of Nintendo include Microsoft and Sony. The PC company Apple is also entering this competition via mobile devices and computers, PC gaming. So they're a big player. And they're also competing against Activision, who is a real game designer. When you're comparing sales from the various companies, it presents a real challenge. When looking at sales statistics coming out of Yahoo Finance and CNN Money and places such as that, it's real tough to tell when you compare Microsoft, Nintendo, Sony, and Activision. They have such diverse sales. Nintendo is truly the only gaming market, the gaming company. So Microsoft sales reflect their sales in computer sales, while Sony's looking at TVs. There's just a lot going on. Activision has movie production and other things. So it makes it real tough to compare them over the last 3 years. But this demonstrates to me the different, how each company is doing as an organization. Nintendo is consistently showing in their numbers the large losses in sales over the last 3 years, where Microsoft is demonstrating consistent gains over each year. Net income demonstrates the same thing. And then overall stock price shows that Nintendo's had 3 years of decreases, where each of the competitors is not demonstrating the same thing. With their diversity, they've managed through the recession with a little bit more ability to not stagnate or decrease. So while many things within the economy are decreasing, Nintendo, Microsoft, Sony, and Activision are not having that same difficulty. So when you look at the different competitors, Microsoft introduced their most recent invention. It's the Xbox One, and they've most recently added that to the market in 2013. They've improved on their own technology. They've created a full entertainment hub of integration with your TV, Skype capability, streaming, apps. They have a wildly popular Kinect device, which works with the Xbox One, and it was Microsoft's competitor to the Wii. And it really took gaming to the next level, where the person became the controller, and the player sensing technology really caught on and shot Microsoft up in sales, really helped them out. Sony's been another competitor, with their most direct competitor to the Xbox One and the Wii U being their PS4. While the PS4 is extremely similar, very similar to the Xbox One, it has a very integrated approach in services, games, features, apps. Very much of it is very comparable to the Xbox One, but both the Xbox One and the PS4 have distinct differences with the Wii U. Activision's a potential threat because they supply many of the games to all of the gaming systems. Their most popular game being Call of Duty has been extremely popular across all of the different companies with gaming consoles. So should they align with any one of the many game console companies and not align with Nintendo, there could be a significant amount of competition that develops as a result of that. Another competitor which has become more popular as of recently is a threat to Microsoft in the PC market, but is a threat to Nintendo in the mobile gaming market, where mobile phones and tablets are quickly becoming the way that people compete and play these different games that Nintendo's offering. When everybody's carrying around a mobile phone, it makes it real difficult for someone to go spend more money on a gaming console when you really have to have a phone. Or people feel as though they have to have a phone. It's difficult to compete with that. When you do an internal analysis, when you're looking at that aspect of it and evaluating the annual reports and statements, the president of Nintendo even realizes the incredible challenges that face Nintendo. He's recently taken a pay cut and cut his salary by 50% to show his goodwill towards where Nintendo is headed, and he's working very hard to rectify some of what's been going on. Their goal has been to remain consistent with their own internal goals and actions. They want to focus on what got them to where they have been in the past. They don't want to stray from where they have been. They want to stick with what they had and what was working. So now we should look at some of the key problems facing Nintendo. One of the challenges that they have is that their most recent console, the Wii U, is already considered outdated and did not present enough innovation to capture the hearts and souls of gamers. They failed to integrate a lot of the changes and the new developments in gaming, such as cloud technology and integration with different apps on their computer and streaming, so that some of the features are not as desirable as what the PS4 and the Xbox One present. while they've tried to remain solid to the core, they've kind of failed to recognize their own strength, which is being innovative, appealing to the hearts and minds of gamers. They've kind of failed to capture what they've set out to do all along. Much like their venture into operating taxi cab companies and a hotel, which didn't work out, Nintendo has to focus on fresh, new, innovative ideas that can get them back into the gaming industry and compete head to head with Microsoft and Sony. Some of the recommendations that we might have to help Nintendo is that currently they don't possess a lot of online capability. They don't have downloadable games. Why not take their games to a downloadable level? Why not put online some of the classic Nintendo games that people loved from the past? Just like PS4 and Xbox One, maybe they should appeal to the Nintendo games, Super Mario Brothers, Mario Kart, some of those Nintendo games. Why not put them on the market with PlayStation and Xbox One? While people are still desiring to play those games, they may not desire to buy a Wii U console, but take their games and sell them with PS4 and Xbox One. Those games have been wildly successful, so why not sell them on the market? They need to create a platform that allows gamers to work between the console and their phone and their computer. Something to where they can operate a game back and forth between the various different technologies. They need to break into the mobile gaming industry. Apple and PC, Microsoft have a corner on that, and Nintendo needs to break into the PC gaming industry, which is the same as I said before, getting into the old games and getting into putting their game on a PS4. And then while they're reintroducing the classic games, as I mentioned, they could use their time to have R&D develop new games and kind of come up with that next new and innovative idea. So Nintendo's plan so far for innovation, what they're working on right now, is the Nintendo figurine platform, where you can create a player, personalize it, raise it, train it, and then use it in multiple games throughout the Nintendo systems. Take that character with you from game to game. This allows people to customize their features, their player and their character, and make them personalized the way that they like them. They're going to attempt to get involved in the health environment, and people were wildly intrigued by the Wii Fit and the aspects of that. So while a lot of people were intrigued by that, they may have lost interest or lost focus because there didn't continue to be that focus on those games like Brain Age and Wii Fit. So getting back to some of the health issues and the opportunities for integrating with health care and fitness, they can re-engage that same demographic of folks that was once involved and engaged in that product. So what will be the fate of Nintendo in the future? This remains to be seen. It's hard to believe that a company that's been around for this long with this kind of heritage can have just a few hard years, but yet at the same time they're really struggling financially. It'll be interesting to see how they choose to go about these next few years and what innovative ideas they're going to have. I thank you from Michael, Simon, and myself, Adam Richards. I thank you, and it's been a great semester. We thank you very much for your hard work. Have a good day.